everyone, we are Geeks Not Nerds. I'm Captain Logan.
I'm Vince.
And today we are going to get away from the multi-topic extravaganza a little bit in order to do a regular show. We're going to do a few of these probably in the middle of some of the multi-topic extravaganza. And Vince, what are we talking about today? This is a Vince topic.
Well, I had this idea while I was standing in a bathroom, taking a leak, looking at a picture of Metamorpho. So that's the genesis of this. I just thought I'd share. So, who has a picture of Metamorpho in their bathroom?
I'm going to start bringing... I'm going to start... In my defense, it's not only Metamorpho. There's a character in the middle.
It's a picture of the death of Superman's funeral.
He's there. Anyway, it wasn't the funeral. We weren't mourning the death of Superman. We were mourning but well, some of us mourn the death of Superman. But anyway, so I need to start bringing Vince to GNN a sign. A
this is going to be inappropriate.
A TMI sign.
Yeah, I just thought I'd share that.
TMI. Anyway, Vince.
I like Timmy. TMI.
So Vince, what are we talking about? Because you saw a
picture
random
of
picture, fatefully, of Metamorpho.
I was thinking, how does identity change when physical appearance changes?
Yeah.
So, and I'm thinking about this specifically in the idea of like a fictional world where characters either their appearance changes not by choice or their ability is to change their appearance. So, which I think is kind of two topics, really. But
oh, it's all linked, though, right? I mean, the first thing we should mention, of course, is that superhero stories, and some of this will get outside of superheroes. You have lots of characters that can change their appearance all over science fiction and fantasy and stuff. But
like Odo,
but just starting in superhero territory, superhero stories are already about identity. They're already about who was I before I put on the cape and who am I after that, and do I remain the same person when I'm in costume versus out of the costume? Do I put the costume on in order to pretend to be something that I'd rather be? Do I become the best version of myself or the more confident version of myself when I put the costume on? So and I could go on and on and on. And I've written a lot about this notion of superhero stories as explorations of a person's sense of self. Mm-hmm. And when you have a shapeshifter, you have to have a lot of that going on. And you said we're talking about this in a fictional context, but I think it is important to mention, of course, that the reason you do this in fiction is because there is a certain amount of truth to this notion of we change fundamentally, or maybe just peripherally even, who we are and how we think of ourselves by the clothes that we wear, by the way that we cut our hair, all these things that we think of as just kind of little superficial things. Sometimes it's a chicken and the egg thing. Do we see ourselves the way we see ourselves because of what we look like, or have we chosen to look the way we do because of the way we see ourselves? And so all of those things. So the stuff that we're going to talk about with shapeshifters, it is about real life too. Yeah,
I mean, I think the big thing in my head that I thought about when I had this idea was maybe maybe people lose their identity, but or maybe people choose their identity. And I think based on what you just said, I think that's kind of an interesting thing about like specifically characters like Batman, who aren't really who they really are unless they have their costume on. So,
or in their minds, they see themselves as more as the person that the outside world perceives them as when they are wearing their costume.
Yeah. So I almost wonder, like, to some extent, I could say like physical appearance means something for how you see yourself, but it isn't the sole decider of what it is.
Well, no, certainly not. And there's a lot of things that go in there. We could do a whole show on. I mean, this would be harder to talk about in a fictional context, but I mean, you could do an entire discussion about how people's names influence how they see themselves and what kind of identity they have. All of the would you be the same person fundamentally? Would you be the same kind of person if your parents had named you Waldo instead of Vince?
Oh, poor Waldo.
I mean, would you be because it's sort of a butterfly effect thing, right? It's sort of that ripple effect. If you throw a pebble in a river and then you get all these ripples. If you if you had been, this is totally different. I'm running off the rails, but I want to say this. Can I say this? Is that
yeah,
okay?
go right ahead.
If you had been named Waldo growing up,
people would have been looking for me all the time.
Just give me a second. If you've been named, I'm getting there. If you've been named Waldo, and you in the time that you and I grew up, early '90s. You would have gotten that joke all the time.
Yeah.
People would have constantly, oh, found you, you know,
yeah.
or
I sure did.
And also we live not too far away from a town called Waldo, Kansas.
Oh,
and,
yeah, that's right.
That would also be a thing that would come up. And what kind of, how much does that affect your life when you would have had all these different experiences? There could have been instances where someone made fun of you because of your name that for whatever reason led you in a different path, and by now at the age you are now, 27, 28, now you're a somewhat different person than if you'd been named Vince. And physical appearance is the same way. If my nose was bigger, would I be a little bit different? If I chose to never grow a beard, would I be a little bit different? All these sorts of things affect the way we look at ourselves, and that affects the way that and the way other people perceive us, and both of those things together, somewhat in different capacities, of course, affect the way that we choose to operate.
I think that the name thing, even though you're like, well, can I go down this road? I think that's a terrific point, because to some extent, you can't choose your name. It's chosen for you. And you can change it later, sure, whatever, I understand that. But
it's already affected you.
A lot of us already, yeah, there are certain things that are thrust upon you that change who you are. And in fiction, I think a terrific example is The Invisible Man and Hollow Man. So those two things. One's a movie, one's a movie and a book and whatever.
Right.
But so
often
I realize they're not the same thing.
Invisible Man. Oh, well, I'm glad you made that distinction. But he's talking about H.G. Wells' Invisible Man, and Invisible Man is in some circles considered to be the first science fiction novel. Some people go to Verne, but a lot of people say that Verne is closer to science fantasy, and a lot of people point to if not Frankenstein, it's Invisible Man. Mm-hmm. I just wanted to tack that on real quick. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I like that. So Invisible Man, essentially, and Hollow Man is fresher in my memory because I've seen that more recently. But these characters, they can no longer see themselves, so therefore their concept of self changes enough that allows them to do things that they wouldn't have done before. Why? Because they don't have to face themselves in the mirror every day. There's another movie kind of like that.
And so you're saying that it's easier to drop morality.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
I'm not saying that it would have been quite as bad as in Hollow Man, but I mean, if you look at Hollow Man, he starts having a little sexual deviance. He starts invading people's privacy. He starts hiding where people couldn't see him, saying, doing things that he shouldn't be doing.
Because he can get away with it. Yeah.
And I'm not saying it would have gotten to the extent of murder. I'm just saying that, if you're 14 and you can turn invisible, or you are invisible, what's going to stop you from walking in the girls' locker room? I mean, it is what it is. So, because you have options, that changes who you are. Now, that being said, I also think that because you don't have options, that changes who you are. I almost feel like because you are invisible, as in the case of Hollow Man or the Invisible Man, where you cannot change back, or at least you don't have any means of changing back in the short term, you will make these choices more freely, because at some point you say, well, this is who I am now. These are the things I can do, and these things I can't do are no longer on the table. Nobody's going to look at me ever again. So I'm gonna take advantage of this.
Yeah. What you're describing is the phenomenon of people allowing themselves to be defined by other people's expectations of them. Mm-hmm.
That's the thing.
If you don't have to deal with people, then you don't have to deal with their expectations of you. But then let's not assume that every person that became invisible would necessarily go to that place, because some people might have such a rigid, defined moral code for themselves that even in that situation, they cannot bring themselves to break it.
Yeah.
So you have those sorts of people too.
I mean, the temptation would be greater because now you can get away with it. But,
right.
But you go sit in on some private meetings where now you can now you have insider information. You can trade stocks easier. So suddenly you're rich. But
don't you think some of it just depends on, might somewhat depend on whatever your like moral compass was in the first place, whatever whatever sort of brand of ethics you subscribed to. So if you are, say, a religious person and you think that your ethics come from a god, come from a deity, and you became invisible, you might see it just as a trial that God has given to you, right? And then if you saw it that way, then you would continue to say, well, God gave me these commandments and I can't break them. But then a person that doesn't look at things that way might not see it that way, and might think, well, might see morality as more flexible, or just have a different sort of morality, and say, well, survival is more important now, and so the easiest way to survive is to steal stuff because nobody can see me.
Yeah.
But you know all those sorts of things.
It's not like you can work in customer service anymore.
What I'm saying is that would be a profound change in your life, obviously, that would affect who you were from then on. But let's not forget about all the things that made you who you were in the first place,
Right.
which means that all of the different people that could, let's say that 50 people all became invisible at the same time, you would see 50 different reactions to it.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, to some extent, you can look at things like that.
I love that example, Vince.
I thought of it
good job.
Just as I said it, and I was like, I got to get this out.
That was great, yeah.
And
it's about what we're talking about. It's lack of physical appearance.
So,
but let's get into shapeshifters.
Let's get into shapeshifters. I mean, you look at somebody like Mystique, who shapeshifts. Somebody like Odo. You have these characters who can not only change what they look like. Not even like just. I mean, there are people in this world who can change the color of their eyes.
Yeah.
But you have somebody who changes themselves or their self, whatever. Figure out the word, then put it in there.
Well, let's see. Let's get this grammatically correct. You said people.
Yeah.
You did not say
Themselves.
a person. So people themselves.
Yeah, indeed. So people who can change their self into. Anyway, people who can change themselves into whatever they choose to look
self,
like.
Not a word.
And they self.
They self.
So
himself, herself, himself.
We selves.
We don't have a generic pronoun in English. It makes life very difficult.
Our self, because I'm now Venom.
Okay, anyway. that's great. Oh, he's kind of a shapeshifter.
Yeah, but he can change back into his regular form.
Well, that's true, but the fact that he's able to go back and forth obviously has to, affect his affect the way that he looks at it. And also what your sense of self would be if you were attached to a symbiotic organism is a totally different topic. But let's go to what you're talking about with Odo and Mystique.
So you have Mystique, who I believe I read in a comic book at some point that it's hard for her to really know who she is outside of her mutation. Because she can be anything or anyone and mimic anything or anyone, and the only thing that limits her is how she sees or how she is able to see herself. Now, I realize this might be a weird avenue to go down, but character acting, you lose yourself in a character, right?
Yeah.
There is a possibility. What's that guy's name? Jim Carrey annoyed the crap out of people on the set of Man on the Moon because he basically channeled Andy Kaufman the whole time. And that's something that's interesting.
But that's what Andy Kaufman was all about, too.
Right.
When you're talking about losing yourself in a character and refusing to be the person everybody expects you to be. Oh, yeah. No, we're talking about exactly the same thing. Now with Mystique, I've not read a ton of Mystique comics, a ton of stuff with her in comics, so more of the material I would have to grab onto obviously would be movies, and recently we had Days of Future Past, which has some cool character study for her. At least inside the films, I'm just going to go there for a second. At least inside the films, I don't feel like there really is a lot of exploration of Mystique losing herself in anybody. I feel like she has a pretty good sense of at least who she thinks she is, where she will. I mean, think about it. She pretended to be Senator Kelly for a really long time, but she didn't really adopt any of his character traits or anything. But again, I think that's because she's got a particular, if not moral code, she's got like a particular worldview where she says, my life is about making sure that I create a world where it's easier and safer for someone who can do what I do to live in. And so when you have tunnel vision like that, it's almost like she uses her ability more as a tool than anything else. And then her identity is based around this sense of I should be allowed to freely use that gift, but I also should be allowed to look the way I do in the first place. And I should be proud of this, outwardly perceived as strange, blue person that I am.
Based on that, I got to say that I'm not sure if I'm right about this. In the movies, I think that that is right, because she's always been that blue person, as evidenced by, what's the one that came out not so recently?
What, First Class?
Yeah, First Class.
But see,
because you see her as a child in that movie.
Yeah, but then First Class, for a lot of years, she tries to embody the human version and be okay with that, and not go blue very often. But she's not okay with it because she knows that. So what I'm saying is, she knows what she naturally looks like. She wants to be able to not have to use her ability because it's like a cheat, because it allows her to hide. But she shouldn't have to, and she says that next too. When Nightcrawler asks her why don't you look human all the time? Because I shouldn't have to. And so the whole notion is that she sees her power set as just a way to fit in. And so even though she wants everyone to be okay with her being a mutant, her power is as much of a is as much of a problem as it is a gift, right?
I always thought, agreed. I've always thought that mutant powers were supposed to manifest at puberty, and because they talk about that frequently in the comic books. But so I don't know for certain, but I've always thought when Mystique hit puberty, that's when she turned blue.
But not according to First Class.
Yeah, not according to First Class. So, I mean, that's the thing, is that in the movies, I think that's a terrific example. In the comic books, I feel like I've read stuff about Mystique saying she's kind of lost herself in her character. She doesn't know who she is anymore.
Well, that's very interesting, too, yeah.
Like, at some point, when you no longer look at your face, like, she's old enough that she doesn't even remember what she really used to look like. And that's what I kind of clinged to. And,
well, don't you think telepathy would do the same thing to you?
That's a terrific example.
Potentially. Because
you see other people's minds so much, do you really know your own anymore? So, see other people's minds like it's a physical, tangible thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when you do a podcast and you're editing it and you're in Audacity, you're looking at the sound. Yeah, I can see.
That's true.
I'm looking at the sound. Anyway, sorry.
I could. The music goes round my head. So, what
were we talking about?
I'm not sure.
You brought up. Hey, I'm sorry. Did you have a place to go with Mystique? Were you still talking about that?
I went there. Do your thing.
Odo.
Yeah, Odo.
You brought up Odo, and I
don't know too terribly much.
Okay, well, I'll teach you a little bit because this is interesting. You brought up Mystique and Odo because they both sort of have the same power, but when I say sort of, it's because Odo is a very different organism. He is an amorphous organism. Odo's natural state is liquid form, and he doesn't want to be liquid form all the time. Until eventually he decides he wants to go back with his people, or considers doing that, and then that's a different thing, and become part of this Great Link, and that gets into some very interesting identity ideas too, because when they all come together, they form one big collective consciousness. When he's by himself and he doesn't know who his people are, and he hasn't found them yet, he has to completely invent himself from the ground up. And that's what makes him different from Mystique, because Mystique is still a humanoid character. She's still, whether you want to think of humans and mutants as separate species or not, she still has 2 arms and 2 legs any way you slice it until she decides to. And honestly, we never see her, at least in the movies, turn into anything but another humanoid. So I'm not sure she's even capable of being a plant or a water slide. That's something Odo can do. Odo can turn into anything. Odo is not. He can be a pancake. He could be a waffle. He could be anything.
That's really interesting. I mean, the power I knew about, but that's really interesting that he's his whole group of people together, because I mean that might explain the aggression. That might explain like his very one way. Because what you call it, black and white. let's move on. Go ahead.
No, you're cool. But you just need to watch more DS9. But Odo's people are not by nature singular consciousnesses. They can be. They can connect off and break off and go off on their own, and they can survive that way. But it's not natural for them. They're used to all being together, and then when the way it's explained in the show is that, and this is one of those things where it's kind of this. Again, somewhat amorphous idea. The idea is somewhat amorphous, where it's like you can't really explain it to a person unless they are also one of the Great Links. So the idea is when they're all together, they are one shared organism. They are all of the pieces of the whole and also the whole. So if one of them decides to get out of the pool and leave, then they become a singular consciousness. But once they come back, and if any of them are gone, they don't feel completely whole. That's kind of the idea. So anyway, what makes Odo a distinctly different sort of character, and what makes the identity issues interesting to explore, is that every few hours, Odo has to go back into his natural liquid state, and kind of it's basically his nap time, and just like rest and be that shape for a while, because it takes concentration. He has to think about it in order to be another thing, and of course Mystique has to do that too. But once again, the big difference is he is not naturally a humanoid person. He appears humanoid. He becomes that because he wants to be with these other intelligent beings that all look like that, and he is expected to look a certain way. And so he does. Again, that's where social expectations come in. And so, but again, it's different from Mystique because, first of all, she is one of many and knows that there is a whole race of her kind, that they all do different things, but they all consider themselves the same kind. Odo, at least for a long time, doesn't know about the rest of the Link, doesn't realize that there are other that there are other changelings, and he has to kind of invent himself from the ground up and create his own identity. Right there. So anyway, very, very interesting, different sorts of characters, and I mean, we could go on and on and on about what's interesting about putting those two together. We should probably come up with some other examples and things, but
so for all of you out there who are like, Vince, you need to watch more Star Trek. I know, I do. So there's something you said about the social expectation.
Yeah.
Of people expecting you to look a certain way, and I think that's interesting on how that reflects on your own psyche, like how much depression can come from a dramatic change. Like one of my favorite characters, The Thing, who didn't want to change into a giant rock creature, and now he is. So you look at a character like that, and he is so down on himself. He thinks everyone sees him as a monster. And of course, people react a little frightened of him initially. But in so many of the comics, in fact, I just recently read a Marvel 2-in-1, I think issue 90, where a character says to another character, she says, people just have to get to know Ben, and then they realize that he's a person just like any other person, and he's a good guy. And it's almost like the thing that fuels Ben Grimm's rage that he acts out so often is because he's changed into this monster. So he starts to act like a monster because people expect him to be ferocious. But he's not. He's generally a pretty decent guy. But now, on that same note, there is something to be said from what you said earlier about how they were previously. Ben Grimm does have a history of gang life when he was on Yancey Street. So you have that character. And
he did already have a pretty inflammatory temper.
Exactly. So he had a temper.
That was there.
Now he has the strength to force that on other things.
And that's one of those fun fiction things where he gets a power and a new look that reflects what his personality was already, and now he's forced to, on a constant basis, have to contend with it, have to deal with it. So he acts the way he does, and I think we've all had this where it's difficult sometimes to not be sponges and do what other people think you are going to do, even if it's not what they want you to. Isn't that strange? Where you're like, okay, everyone in this whatever we're talking about, everyone in this situation would probably like me a lot better if I was just being a really nice guy, but human beings are kind of, a lot of the time, beings of continuity, and so we don't sometimes know how to just be nice if we, like, this is just an example. Let's say we've been kind of jerk faces for a while. I've been mean to people. I've been a jerk face for a while, and people got used to me constantly snapping at them. So then so then I'm talking to them, and I'm trying to be nice, and I'm like, okay, today's the day. I'm not going to act like that. And then I walk up to you, and then I start talking to you, and then you give me this look like I'm acting a little different. I'm acting out of character, and suddenly I feel like I have to get back into character. And what if you looked like a rock monster all the time? And what if everyone always gave you this look like, oh my God, he's a rock monster, and you want to have this attitude of things are not what they always seem, and just look past that. And when people can't look past that, A, it makes you angry, and B, they expect you to be angry. So how easy is it to just simply be angry?
You know, precisely. There's a character that I think is a good parallel, but not the exact same thing. So I'm going to bring it up. Beast. You look at Beast, who desperately tried to change his mutant appearance. You know, he didn't want to be short and stocky and look like a gorilla. He didn't want to do that anymore. I mean, you know, a humanoid gorilla, because he wasn't all hairy. But then he takes some serum that he thinks is going to change his body, and now he's a big blue furry guy. You fast forward about 10, 15 years, and suddenly Beast is a member of the Avengers, and he's kind of a celebrity, and he's embraced this.
And he becomes comfortable with it.
And he's almost treated, not in the larger society of reality, but within the continuity, he's almost a sex symbol, because he's this muscular guy, and people know him. And one, he's extremely smart, so he's very witty, which I think, you know, that's what he has on Ben Grimm, who has, you know, he's an average dude. He's a blue-collar guy.
Was a little bit of a meathead.
Yeah, and he knows that, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's okay to be from the streets and be a blue-collar guy. But then you have the Beast, who is extremely smart and knows how to work things in his favor, and he just accepts it, and then he finds a way to make other people accept it. So then you see things like
and then
confident Kelsey Grammer Beast strolling through a hall.
And then his look can become a symbol for that.
Yeah.
He can now we can start changing what the symbols mean. You know, we can take something that has always been a stereotype to mean one thing. Okay, big scary creatures equal going to viciously attack anything they see. That's a monster, has no brain in its head. To, you know, one of the most brilliant people on the planet, Hank McCoy, looks like this. Oh, things aren't always what they look like. Maybe we should adjust our expectations, because if we don't, we're going to miss something. We're going to have missed opportunities. We're gonna, you know, cool things pass us by because we're too close-minded to appreciate what simply is, instead of trying to make everything, you know, fit everything into the box of what we're used to seeing things. And people like to do that because it makes things easier for them. They say this is how it is, and as long as it's always that way, I understand the world. What we have to become, what we have to become comfortable with, and that's why I love these kinds of characters, because they reflect things. They reflect these things in real life. What we have to do is we have to embrace the fact that we will never completely understand how things work.
Yeah.
And people on the whole, and things are that people are never going to be what you expect them to be, and can't that be wonderful?
You bring up a terrific point.
I don't know what I'm talking about.
Well, I mean, you bring up a terrific point. I was watching a documentary yesterday called Dock of the Dead. How is this related? I'll get to it. And it's a documentary about
shape-shifting zombies. Oh, wow.
Incidentally, that'd be great. Incidentally,
so you know what? We should do that. We should do something, Vince, with zombies with like identity issues. Yeah, identity crisis zombies. Yeah, I'm sorry.
There was kind of a movie like that.
Oh, okay, never mind. I'm sure every cool idea I ever come up with has been done already.
Well, I mean, that's true of every idea that's come up with.
You're right.
Except for the ones that originated.
The question is, was it effective?
Yeah, indeed. Did you do it well? Did you convince your audience that it is different? So
I'm asking you, was that movie any good?
Yeah, I liked it.
Oh, okay, all right. There you go. Sorry.
So there's a couple movies, very different, but
zombie documentary.
So the zombie documentary, thank you. So the zombie documentary, there's a very specific point in this movie that I'm going to go to. And they're talking about zombie walks and how people are coming together. And I forget who said it, but they said the thing that's interesting to me about it is that, like, you go to a football game, people aren't nice to each other. It's a football game. That's a bunch of individuals. You go to a zombie walk, people are nice to each other. Granted, they look like creatures of the undead. But they're nice to each other. And then somebody says one of the interesting things about a zombie walk is that there's a lot of hookups that happen at a zombie walk. There's a lot of people that get together and form relationships out of this thing. One of the reasons they cited for it anyway, I suppose you could take a survey and actually find this out, but one of the deals is that they have all this zombie makeup on their face. They intentionally made themselves unattractive. So now you have taken that social stigma of, is he handsome? Is she pretty? And you've removed that, and you've come together, and now it's two personalities that have a common interest.
Because you have no idea what's underneath.
So in some ways, if you can remove the social stigma, which is what the character does for Beast, creating that outward, you guys should look at me as an example. If you can remove that social stigma, you now have people that can judge people based on who they are, which is, within fiction, you can look at civilizations like Adelan, or however you pronounce that, for the Inhumans in the Marvel Universe, who everybody looks incredibly different from each other. And so then it's just kind of based on who you're interested in, who you're drawn to, but or at least presumably it would have to be. I suppose they could have some kind of conventions, whatever. But then you have characters like the Thing, who sticks out in their society, who's dating a blind girl, and the interesting thing about that is that
wasn't she blonde in the early comics?
Initially, she put on a blonde wig because she looked stunningly like Sue Storm.
Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah,
that's hilarious. I didn't know that.
I think she's drawn with kind of an orangey brown hair.
Okay.
I think I actually forget because I haven't seen Alicia Masters in anything that wasn't black and white recently.
Oh yeah, because you're reading Essentials.
Yeah, the Essentials. That was just the easiest, cheapest way to get those things. So the Marvel 2-in-1s, that is. But so Alicia Masters,
you don't have to defend reading black and white comics. Man.
No, they're like black and white. What is it reading? I'm just telling you what it is. So
it's like, look, I'm sorry, I like comics and I'm cheap.
I enjoy coloring books and comic books. That's all I'm saying.
I was insulting you, and I'm insulted.
I'm just rolling with it.
I'm insulted that you weren't insulted, Vince.
I'm insulted that you tried to insult me, but I'm not insulted, so deal with it. So you're like, that doesn't actually make sense.
Carry the force. Anyway,
so you have
Vince. I love the zombie walk thing. That's fascinating.
It's on Netflix. Watch it. It's really interesting.
Okay, I will.
It's incidentally, I've seen better like it almost every time I watch a zombie documentary, they're always at least interesting. And it seems like half the time when I watch a zombie movie, that's crap.
Imagine going back to your 10-year-old self and saying, someday you will grow up and you will say the phrase, every time I watch a zombie documentary.
Yeah. There was something said, I'm sorry, I'm going to take this way the heck off track. There was something said in that zombie documentary.
That's time for zombie rant. So.
That made me just go, like, it floored me, and I rewound it, and I made my wife, Elena, watch it again. And I was like, can you believe he just said that? Because the guy said, it's interesting that zombies are now becoming such a major part of pop culture. These things are now meriting the big blockbuster movies like superheroes or action heroes. And I went, superheroes! It is now a foregone conclusion that superheroes are a big thing. And somebody just compared zombies to superheroes. And I went, this is great. And
I bet a lot of people would at this point not even bat an eye at that and think that that's... But like, when you and I were growing up, we never thought we'd see that. Yeah. And suddenly Avengers breaks all the records and we're going... I didn't know this was even... I mean, superheroes are not only a huge movie thing now, but they're the biggest money-making movie thing now. Yeah. That's crazy. I mean, like, it's right there. It's crazy.
Like, for a 15-year-old to say that, it would be one thing, because I'd be like, well, you haven't known any other universe at the moment.
Yeah, but if you're pushing 30, wow.
But for somebody who's 30, I'm like, how quickly we forget that this was not the way it was. I mean, look at the Western. It's gone. I mean...
It's not gone, but it's not gone. It's not the phenomenon.
I mean, it's amazing.
That it used to be. And who knows if superheroes will always be this kind of phenomenon, but we've seen it. We saw it happen.
Yeah.
It's great. We never thought we'd see that happen.
It was just fascinating. I had to bring that up.
Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm glad you brought that. Wow.
That's such a cool thing to just be the foregone conclusion.
And he said superheroes in action movies. Like superhero used to be the...
It was just part of an action movie.
It was a subgenre. I mean, when I started doing Rewind, you know, this is 5 years ago, almost 6, before we had quite the explosion. I mean, it was big. Dark Knight already happened, but I mean, like, even then I felt the need to keep calling it a subgenre. At this point, I don't know if I can even really call it that anymore.
Because now we have non-action superhero movies. We have things like Paperman that has a superhero in it.
Yeah, it goes in all these. Anyway, whatever. What were we talking? Are there any other
identity issues? Are
there any other kind of? We've been doing this for a while. We should probably wrap it up, but I feel like this is a conversation we could have all day long. Maybe there's a follow-up here. But are there any other examples of shapeshifters or characters that used to look one way and they're stuck looking a different way that we might want to bring into this whole thing?
There's Swamp Thing.
Oh yeah, that's true. Well, we haven't even talked about like the Jekyll Hyde type characters and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Which I think Swamp Thing sort of qualifies, but there's, or at least the movie kind of played it that way. But because I don't know a lot about Swamp Thing.
I read the original 10, including the House of Mystery. But the Swamp things. That sounds. Word would have a problem with that. Microsoft Word, Swamp Thing things. So. In the Swamp Thing books, he was almost... They almost needed to retrain him. Arcane, I guess. Whatever people that he came across. Needed to retrain him to live as this swamp creature. So there's not a heck of a lot more that I really wanted to get into with the Swamp Thing, but I bring him up because here's a person who has his old memories, but he looks at it as an entirely different life. He says, well, I'm not that guy anymore.
It's like he was reborn as this other thing. And a lot of the time, isn't it like a practical thing? Isn't it like, well, if I can't go back to my old life and I can't have the relationships that I had and I can't have my stuff anymore and I don't get to drive home after work at 6 o'clock anymore and sit on the couch and drink a beer, you know, if I can't do all that anymore, then don't I have to adopt some other lifestyle? And isn't it unhealthy? Is it maybe, I'm just asking the question, is it maybe potentially unhealthy for me to continue to consider myself that other person? Do I have to completely adopt another thing, or is there a middle ground? Is that too extreme? Is there some way to go in between? Spawn wanted to deal with those ideas. He didn't always do it very effectively, but that was okay. It rarely did that, but Spawn. I'm just bringing this up because, of course, I'm still in the thick of Spawn year, and so these identity issues I think about a lot. I write about them in Spawn year, and that's a thing where you have a guy who made some mistakes in life and started to, at the end of life, kind of lose his humanity a little bit. He started like he didn't have the same regard for life that he used to because he had killed too many people and he became too okay with it, too comfortable with it, and so he had, to a degree, lost some of his humanity already, and then Spawn was almost like a foregone conclusion. You know what I mean? And I think that's kind of an interesting idea if more cool things have been done with it. But then the question becomes, once this guy is this totally other undead creature who can do pretty much anything he can think of, superpower wise. Once you have all that, are you at all the person you were before? And of course, then that whole thing gets into some kind of like mystical questions of, does he still have a soul, and was he ever Al Simmons in the first place, or was he just sort of based on him, and that kind of like Angel Buffy vampire stuff. But I think that, even dealing with those ideas in kind of a tangible fashion like that, kind of a literal way, is somewhat of an interesting way to deal with the more existential question in real life, where if you are changed too much physically, if you get in, like, say, a horrible accident. And I don't even mean, like, through any fault of your own. I don't even mean, okay, you were a mercenary and you died, you made a deal with the devil, and you deserve everything that happens to you now. I'm not talking about that now. I'm talking, say, like, what happened to Christopher Reeve? Like Christopher Reeve falls off a horse and he became almost completely paralyzed, but he made himself keep going. He found a way to keep his identity intact. How easy would it have been for him to just give up? And if he had given up, would he still really be Christopher Reeve anymore? I mean, yes, he would be, but I'm saying on a personal identity place, would he have changed himself to the point where if you sat down and talked to him and you knew him 20 years earlier, he would have been entirely unrecognizable?
Yeah. I mean, I think that to some extent you do have to change. Like, you do have to allow yourself. It's in that, what you're talking about, it's almost a Buddhist concept. Like, you enter the afterlife, you split into 5 different things, and if you're not okay with being in 5 different things, that's essentially your hell.
Oh, wow.
And if you can accept being separated in the afterlife, then that's essentially your heaven.
But then also in a certain way,
I think that's Buddhism.
But also in a certain way, don't you want to say, to a degree, I guess what I'm saying is, level-headedness and not going too extreme. There's part of that is you have to accept the change, but part of it also is you don't want to allow that to completely change you.
Yeah.
So you accept your limitations, but you also say, I'm going to still be who I want to be within what I can do now, which I think is exactly what Christopher Reeve did, and I think was something that maybe I'm comparing a real person now to a fictional person that I don't even know much about, that I think is maybe not what Swamp Thing did.
Right.
I think Swamp Thing said, I can't still be who I want to be. I have to completely embrace I'm now this swamp creature.
Yeah, which, I mean, even then, there's still themes in the story of he has this moral set, this set of values. He has this understanding of the world, and he has his training.
So there's humanity there.
So there's still something there. But yeah, of course, if he wanted to drive home, sit down, and have a beer, he can't do that anymore. He needs to be in the swamp. I mean, well, maybe not needs to be in the swamp, but it's probably a more comfortable surrounding physically for him.
Yeah, so like the most unhealthy thing you can do when you get in an extreme situation like this is to be in enough denial to say, no, I can do anything and you can't tell me what I can't do.
Yeah.
You know, John Locke in Lost, you can't tell me what I can't do. Well, if you're in a wheelchair, you're not going to be able to go on a walkabout. Yeah. Impossible. Walkabouts require walking. Sorry. And hiking. And I mean, you're not going to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a terrific point. Let yourself accept what you cannot change. But don't assume that you have to change everything just because you have.
And be the best version of yourself that you can be within the limitations you have. But also, hope for possibilities. You know, because I mean, what Christopher Reeve always said, and he didn't manage it, but he managed amazing things before he finally passed. Christopher Reeve said, "I'm going to get out of this chair. I'm going to walk again." Was that unreasonable? Was it unrealistic? Well, he got farther than anybody thought he possibly could have, and a lot of people say that it's simply because he was that determined, that motivated, and he had a good attitude. And so, like, he didn't say, if I never walk again, or if I get to a certain day and I've never walked again, I hope someone puts me out of my misery. He didn't say that. Right. You see what I'm saying? So I mean, like, you know, you also, like, I don't think being realistic and like hoping for the best is the same thing as being hopeless and saying, well, this can never happen.
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between saying I will never be happy again because I can't do the things that I used to do, and there's a difference between saying I will try to live my life to the best that I can. I mean.
Well, and also, I don't think it's bad.
I got confused in my head, but please continue.
But also, I don't think it's bad to say, maybe I'll be able to do this again.
Yeah.
Even though all the doctors say I won't, we don't understand enough about the brain to ever be able to say never.
I think that's
what Christopher Reeve did. It's weird that we've gotten to this, but I guess we've gone from the fictional context of this into more of the real context of this. But yeah, this is about, you know, how much should you allow sudden dramatic changes to actually change you emotionally, and how much of that do you just have to accept? Well, you are going to be changed to a degree. These huge sorts of things that happen to us are part of us now.
I think the operative term here is oh crap. There's something that we actually say in PT. What is it? Reasonable expectations.
Yeah.
Because can the thing expect everybody to react 100% okay with the fact that he looks like a big rock creature all the time? No, but he can't expect that somebody should give him a chance and shouldn't run from him screaming. So
also, if someone does run from him screaming, that is not a reflection of who he really is, because he knows himself and they don't. Ergo, he can choose how to react to that.
Indeed. So somebody looks really scared and he says, "Hey, how you doing?" And, like, for example, in this issue that I just read, this woman says, "Don't go near that thing, it'll hurt you." And there's this little boy that runs up, recognizes him from the news and whatever, as a member of the Fantastic Four, and he says something about growing up big and strong. I don't know, I forget. And then the Thing picks him up and gives him a piggyback ride, and the woman freaks out a little bit, and he says, "What? You think I would hurt a kid?" And I don't know why I'm putting on a character voice, but so so there's things like that I think are really interesting.
Can I have a piggyback ride?
Right after my hamstring and my leg heals, you surely can.
Yay!
I totally pulled my left bicep muscle and my right hamstring muscle in one day of cardio workout. Dadgummit. Anyway, please continue.
I'm totally taking up on that, and then we're gonna get a video out of it. Anyway,
it'll be probably about a month or so.
Anyway.
That's
look forward to that. Look forward. Anyway, so you were talking about the Thing in that comic book.
Okay, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is reasonable expectations, because there is a difference between saying I don't want to live my life if I can't walk again, and two, saying maybe at some point if I work at it enough I can.
And in the meantime, can't I still live a perfectly productive and worthwhile life without that? And I mean, like, that's easy for those of us that still have our two legs and can walk around to say. If I suddenly became blind, or I suddenly became deaf, or I suddenly got my legs lobbed off for some reason, I don't know that I would that it would be easy for me to say that.
Right, but I mean, even then, there are still people who things happen to them, and then they develop a new outlook on life.
I mean, I edit videos for a living. That's what I do. What would I feel like? What would I feel about my life if suddenly I couldn't see?
Yeah, that's
how would that affect me? You know what I mean?
I mean, and there's always those games like, would you rather lose your sight, lose your hearing, lose a leg, lose an arm, things of this kind.
Yeah.
And I think when you can choose things, it makes it easier on your life. But when you have things forced on you, you're like, well, I don't know how I would accept this if it suddenly went away.
Yeah, and that's why a lot of those shapeshifter stories are just things about, stories about people who were one way, but they're some other way, and they can't help it. I always find them. I mean, they're interesting anyway, but it seems like a lot of the most interesting of them are the ones where, and it seems maybe this is actually, most of them are this way, where, and this is why they're this way, where they can't help it. They are this way, and it's the way they're going to be. And I mean, like all the characters that we've talked about, even when we talked about Odo, from birth, well, this is the way it is. He didn't choose to be a shapeshifter. And I think the other thing that I really like about these kinds of stories is that they go to one of the coolest powers. Now, I know that some of the characters we're talking about are people that were one way, they're physically something else, and they can't go back and forth. Right. But I mean, but when you talk about characters that can shapeshift,
in the new movie, whatever.
Yeah. But when you're talking about characters that can shapeshift, and I don't just mean into one other thing, I mean into anything they want to be, or into any person they want to be. We think about that as, or even, we didn't talk about this, and I don't want to get into these characters, but I just want to throw out a couple other things. Characters that can alter the perceptions of other people to think they look a certain way, but they don't. And like that probably wouldn't change how they looked about themselves as much, except that they would think differently about themselves because they knew that they could, manipulate people and make people think about them differently. But like Mysterio, and characters like that, we think about these kinds of characters as, isn't that shapeshifters as, wouldn't that be the coolest thing? Mm. Like a lot of people, that's one of the powers they like to go to. If you had a superpower, what would you? Well, I would become anybody I wanted to, because that would be incredibly helpful for any situation I happen to be in. And then if you think about every character that you can think of that has that ability, it's always a blessing and a curse. Right. And a lot of the time, it's more of a curse than not. And I find myself, for whatever reason, always really fascinated by the superpowers that make your life harder. Mm-hmm. But at the same time as they kind of make it easier.
Yeah, I mean, I realize that we've moved on to characters that can shapeshift, but
sure.
A good example is the Thing. A guy, now he has super strength, he has incredible durability, but he can't even do things like, now he's almost handicapped in a way, like he can't pick up find things from the ground. Like he couldn't pick up a ring in the movie. Granted, in the comic book, I'm sure that's probably not an issue for him. But I mean, think about it. He has a finger the size of a knuckle, and how does he dial a phone? How does
he can't ride in elevators because he's too heavy? Yeah, you know, like
so.
all
I
that
mean,
kind of stuff.
the movie is a terrific example, but so it's kind of a give and take with your life. Well, now I have this new outlook, but how do I deal with the loss of the thing that I don't have, and with the characters that shapeshift? Since we've moved on to that, because we should, the characters that shapeshift. Is their identity something that's truly knowable from somebody that is not that person? Can your friend or your loved ones know who you really are if you're a shapeshifter? Well, I guess it depends.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, and I like the question you posed earlier. Is that are some of those characters? Do they find themselves in a place where they don't really know who they are either anymore because they've spent too much time pretending? But then, isn't that exactly the same thing as a con artist? Isn't that the same thing as a professional liar? Isn't Mystique simply a supernatural con artist? She's a person that that is, and I mean, like that's being played with right now in Bendis's X-Men, where she, well, I don't want to give any spoilers away. She pretends to be a certain character for a long period of time, and if when you have that, there are certainly people in real life that have that exact same problem. If you pretend, how many stories have we read about, outside of supernatural things, or characters that are not, that don't have superpowers? How many stories have we read where a person is like take the, you haven't seen this, but take the first season or this first season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., for example. Again, I won't give away any spoilers, but when you have a character that is pretending to be one thing for so long, and then begins to become that, begins to empathize with the people that he or she is pretending to be friends with and to be part of. We've all read copious stories about that. And that happens in real life with again con artists, professional liars, people that what about I mean, there's a lot of that in Breaking Bad with Walter White. You have lots of that kind of stuff. So all these identity things, you don't need shape-shifting or putting on masks to deal with, because people, I mean, this is a cliche at this point, of course, but I mean, everybody puts on masks, figurative masks.
Figuratively speaking.
Yeah.
from the mask.
Right, I get it.
So,
I got you.
That's for you.
Anyway.
So I think that's a terrific place to end, actually.
Okay, fantastic. I did not expect this to be an hour-long discussion, but I
expected 30 minutes.
I feel like we went everywhere, but this was fun. Thanks.
Yeah, that was good.
Thanks for bringing that up. That was a neat one.
That was a brain exercise.
Boy, it was. Yeah. We're gonna go do something entirely stupid and superficial now. And
speaking of entirely stupid and superficial, drinking games.
Oh God!
Drinking games.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Why are you bringing this up right now?
Because I read in a comment at some point, somebody said, if we had a drinking game based on every time Vince says "it depends."
I read that comment. Yeah.
When I saw that, and then just a minute ago, I said "it depends."
Oh, I was wondering why you did that.
I just thought I'd give props to the reason I did that.
That was funny. Thanks for explaining that. I had no idea why you did that. Anyway, thanks everybody for watching. We sure appreciate it, and leave your comments on this topic. I'm sure lots of people will have interesting things to say. Feel free to send us more questions for the multi-topic extravaganza, and you can send that to our to YouTube as a personal message, please. That's where I'd like to see those if you don't mind. And if there's anything you'd like to see us talk about in a future video, you can leave that in the comments as well. Thanks as always for watching. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Vince, reminding you to support your local comic book store.
And we will see you next time for more multi-topic extravaganza.